Bonjour tout le monde, merci d'être ici. Je suis accompagné aujourd'hui de la vice-première ministre Freeland et des ministres Joly et Anand. On est ici pour parler des actions inacceptables de la Russie en Ukraine. Le Canada condamne la reconnaissance par le président Poutine de Donetsk et Luhansk comme territoires indépendants. Canada strongly condemns President Putin's recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk as so-called independent states. This recognition is a violation of Russia's obligations under international law and the Charter of the United Nations. Canada also denounces Russian military actions, including orders to move into Ukraine, which is a clear incursion of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Make no mistake, this is a further invasion of a sovereign state, and it is completely unacceptable. President Putin's speech yesterday was inaccurate and contained dangerous misinformation. Russia's brazen provocations are a threat to security and peace in the world. I've been in constant contact with President Zelensky and our partners and allies since this crisis began. Last Friday, I had a call with President Biden, Prime Minister Johnson, President Macron, Chancellor Scholz, and other European leaders about the situation. And yesterday, I spoke again with President von der Leyen of the European Commission. We are united and steadfast in our support of Ukraine and have made clear that Russian aggression will result in severe consequences. So today, in coordination with allies and like-minded partners, Canada is announcing a first round of economic sanctions. We will ban Canadians from all financial dealings with the so-called independent states of Luhansk and Donetsk. We will sanction members of the Russian Parliament who voted for the illegal decision to recognize these so-called republics. We will ban Canadians from engaging in purchases of Russian sovereign debt. And we will apply additional sanctions on 2 state-backed Russian banks and prevent any financial dealings with them. These sanctions are a major step and target those responsible for violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And they will remain in place until the territorial integrity of Ukraine is restored. Aujourd'hui, en coordination avec nos alliés et partenaires, le Canada annonce l'imposition d'une première série de sanctions économiques. On va interdire aux Canadiens de faire toute transaction financière avec les territoires indépendants, soi-disant, de Luhansk et de Donetsk. On va imposer des sanctions aux membres du Parlement russe qui ont voté pour la décision illégale de reconnaître ces territoires. On va interdire aux Canadiens de participer à des achats de la dette souveraine russe. Et on va imposer des sanctions supplémentaires contre les banques russes soutenues par l'État et interdire toute transaction financière avec elles. Ces sanctions marquent une étape importante et ciblent les responsables des violations de la souveraineté et de l'intégrité territoriale de l'Ukraine. Elles vont rester en place jusqu'à ce que l'intégrité territoriale de l'Ukraine soit rétablie. It is not too late for Russia to seek a diplomatic resolution and re-establish a pathway to peace. But it is also clear that Russian actions violate international law and threaten international peace and security. So today, I am also authorizing a deployment of up to 460 members of the Canadian Armed Forces to Operation Reassurance. This involves more troops to Latvia, as well as the deployment of an additional frigate and maritime patrol aircraft. We're doing this to reinforce our commitment to NATO and promote peace and security in Europe. We're also stepping up our support for NATO. Canada has pledged significant additional medical, aircraft, naval, and land capabilities to the NATO response force. This is something that NATO requested from members and will bolster our support of partners and allies. Minister Anand will provide more details in a moment. À tous les membres des Forces armées canadiennes en Lettonie, merci pour votre travail formidable. Vous continuez d'incarner la force et les valeurs canadiennes dans la région. Je tiens aussi à m'adresser aux Canadiens qui sont actuellement en Ukraine. Votre sûreté et votre sécurité sont une priorité absolue. To Canadians currently in Ukraine, your safety and security are a top priority. Consular services are available in Lviv, and you can reach out to Global Affairs Emergency Watch and Response Centre to get support. Their email is sos@international.gc.ca, and phone or messaging numbers are available online. And to the Ukrainian Canadian community here at home, I know the situation is deeply concerning. Your community has made significant contributions to building Canada, and we will stand with you every step of the way. Earlier today, I spoke with the President of the Canadian-Ukrainian Congress and reaffirmed Canada's resolute and ongoing support of Ukraine. Au cours des dernières années et des dernières semaines, le Canada a fourni des ressources importantes pour aider l'Ukraine à se défendre. Depuis 2015, dans le cadre de l'opération unifiée, les membres des Forces armées canadiennes ont formé plus de 30 000 membres des forces de sécurité de l'Ukraine. Le mois dernier, on a prolongé et élargi cette mission de formation. On a aussi accordé des prêts au gouvernement de l'Ukraine pouvant aller jusqu'à 620 millions de dollars et on a fourni de l'équipement ainsi que de l'armement et des munitions qui sont présentement dans les mains de l'armée ukrainienne. Le Canada va continuer d'être là pour soutenir l'Ukraine et sa population. Russia's flagrant disregard for the independence of a sovereign nation is a serious threat to security and stability in the region and around the world. Canada and our allies will defend democracy. We are taking these actions today to stand against authoritarianism. The people of Ukraine, like all people, must be free to determine their own future. We will continue working with our international partners to safeguard Ukraine's territorial integrity and prevent further Russian aggression. Merci beaucoup. I'm happy now to turn it over to Deputy Prime Minister Freeland.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Let me begin by unequivocally condemning Russia's further invasion of Ukraine. Russia's actions are a violation of international law and of the rules-based international order. Permettez-moi de commencer en condamnant cette nouvelle invasion russe de l'Ukraine. Les actions de la Russie sont une violation du droit international et de l'ordre international basé sur des règles. This is an attempt to replace that rules-based international order with a world in which might makes right, where the great powers have the authority to redraw the borders, dictate the foreign policies, and control the governments of sovereign democracies whose only fault is that they are smaller and that their militaries are not as powerful. History tells us that we cannot stand by as a great power attempts to redraw borders and conquer its neighbors. And today is a test of our resolve. That is why Canada has a clear and present stake in this conflict. Today's actions are only the first step. The measures that Canada and our allies have been preparing will be sustained, and they will bite. The economic costs to Russia will be severe. But let me also be very clear. Our quarrel is not with the Russian people. It is with President Vladimir Putin and those around him who are making the choice to threaten a sovereign democracy with subjugation. And it is not too late for Russia to pull back. That would be the right choice for the people of Russia and for the world. But if Russia does not pull back, it will be met with a firm, united, and sustained response from Canada and our allies. The world's autocrats are watching today to see if our alliance of democracies has the will and the capacity to stand up for the rules-based international order. Canada and our allies are resolute in our defense of that order and of freedom, human rights, and democracy around the world. Les autocrates du monde entier observent aujourd'hui pour savoir si notre alliance de démocratie a la volonté et la capacité de défendre l'ordre international fondé sur des règles. Le Canada et ses alliés sont déterminés à défendre cet ordre, ainsi que la liberté, les droits de la personne et la démocratie. We know that in standing up for themselves, the people of Ukraine are standing up for democracy and international law. And so we stand with them. Thank you very much. Et je passe maintenant la parole à ma collègue, la ministre Joly.
Merci, Krisha. Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Good evening. Today and every day, Canada stands with Ukraine and its people. We strongly condemn President Putin's recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent territory and his decision to send troops across the border. This constitutes a clear violation of the Minsk agreements, the UN Charter, and the world order that has protected global security for decades. Canada helped found this order, and we have a role to play in its defense. We are also alarmed by the rhetoric used by President Putin and his revisionist understanding of Ukraine's history and reality. Ukraine is a sovereign country, and President Putin has no right to unilaterally deny its right to exist. Nous condamnons fermement la reconnaissance par le président Poutine de Donetsk et Luhansk comme territoire indépendant et sa décision d'envoyer des troupes de l'autre côté de la frontière ukrainienne. Il s'agit d'une violation manifeste des accords de Minsk, de la Charte des Nations unies et des règles internationales qui protègent la sécurité mondiale depuis maintenant des décennies. Le Canada a contribué à établir ces règles et nous devons les défendre. Nous sommes également alarmés par la rhétorique du président Poutine et ses vues révisionnistes de l'histoire et de la réalité ukrainienne. L'Ukraine est un pays souverain et le président Poutine ne peut nier son droit d'exister. We are at the most dangerous moment for world stability in a generation. Russia's actions represent a direct threat to the peace and security of Ukraine and the world. We have worked extremely hard to prevent this escalation through diplomacy and deterrence. But just as Russia has prepared for this day, so have we. Canada and our partners have been clear. The actions of the Russian regime will be met with severe consequences. These reckless and dangerous acts that will endanger the lives of innocent citizens will not go unpunished. Let us be clear, the invasion has started. Our response begins today, and should Russia escalate, so will the cost imposed by Canada and its allies. Nous avons été clairs, les actions du régime russe auront de graves conséquences et ces actes imprudents et dangereux qui mettent en danger la vie de citoyens innocents ne resteront pas impunis. L'invasion a commencé. Nous répondons donc aujourd'hui, plus la Russie intensifie ses agressions, plus les actions du Canada et de nos alliés vont s'intensifier. Today, you've heard the Prime Minister announce our initial sanctions package, targeting first those responsible for this illegal decision, and second, Russian banks. I would like to elaborate on our sanctioning of pillars of the Russian financial system, which includes Russia's central bank, Russia's National Wealth Fund, and Russia's Ministry of Defense. And of course, their ability to continue to fund this crisis. We know that Russia has been building its war chest, but these reserves will not last forever. As the economic pressure mounts from the sanctions imposed by Canada and its allies, Russia will need to seek new funding by leveraging their sovereign debt. We will make it illegal for Canadians to join in that effort, both directly and indirectly. Without a way to recover these costs, the Russian economy will be severely impacted. Let me reiterate, today's measures are just the beginning. As we have said, should Russia further invade Ukraine, it will be met with severe coordinated economic sanctions and increasing pressure if they refuse to change course. Canada's response is ready. We are prepared to target even more of Russia's financial sector and oligarchs, and we're ready to make significant announcements related to Canadian exports to Russia. Vous avez entendu le Premier ministre concernant, dans le fond, les différentes sanctions. Maintenant, j'aimerais élaborer sur les piliers du système financier russe que nous allons viser. Cela inclut le ministère des Finances, les banques centrales et le Fonds monétaire russe. Et nous savons que la Russie a étoffé sa trésorerie de guerre, mais ces réserves ne vont pas durer éternellement. À mesure que la pression économique s'accentue en raison des sanctions imposées par le Canada et nos alliés, la Russie devra chercher de nouveaux fonds en utilisant notamment sa dette souveraine. Nous ferons en sorte qu'il soit illégal pour les Canadiens de participer à cet effort, tant directement qu'indirectement. Sans un moyen de récupérer ces coûts, l'économie russe sera gravement compromise. Et je le répète, les mesures prises aujourd'hui ne sont qu'un début. Comme nous l'avons dit, si la Russie continue son invasion de l'Ukraine, elle sera confrontée à de sévères sanctions économiques coordonnées. Et des mesures additionnelles sont prêtes. Nous sommes prêts à cibler le secteur financier de la Russie, les oligarques, et nous sommes prêts à faire une annonce importante concernant le contrôle des exportations canadiennes en Russie. I've had the chance to talk to the G7 ministers of foreign affairs this morning. I spoke to my German counterpart just this afternoon. We commend Germany's decision to suspend the certification of Nord Stream 2. This has been our top priority since the beginning, and we've been resolute in our efforts to reach a diplomatic solution. Russia is responsible for this crisis, a crisis they fabricated through disinformation and manipulation. Let me also be clear to Canadians who are in Ukraine, please leave the country. I want to conclude by saying this important message. The international community will continue to call on Russia to reverse course, withdraw its forces, and choose diplomacy. We'll continue our tireless efforts to achieve a peaceful outcome to this crisis for the people of Ukraine. The door of diplomacy is always open, but the window to do so before innocent lives are put at risk is closing. Thank you. I now pass the floor to my colleague Anita Anand.
Good afternoon, bon après-midi. Je suis heureuse d'être ici aujourd'hui pour annoncer la prochaine phase de notre soutien envers la sécurité de l'Ukraine, de l'Europe et du monde. This is a pivotal moment. Hier, la Russie a annoncé la reconnaissance de territoires soi-disant indépendants à l'intérieur des frontières souveraines et internationalement reconnues de l'Ukraine, un État membre des Nations Unies. Il s'agit d'un acte d'escalade flagrant, injustifié et inacceptable. Depuis 2014, la Russie occupe illégalement le territoire ukrainien et aujourd'hui, il y a plus de 150 000 soldats russes en Ukraine et ses environs, y compris au Bélarus. NATO, the alliance that has underpinned the rules-based international order that has kept us safe since the end of World War II, is being tested. Much to Mr. Putin's dismay, however, NATO is more unified than ever before. I've just finished a productive meeting of NATO defense ministers in Belgium and additional meetings at the Munich Security Conference, where I met with partners and allies from across the alliance, and I witnessed and felt this resolve. I can say without hesitation that our alliance shares a common commitment to defending the rules-based international order. During my time in Europe, I heard over and over again that our allies want more of what Canada has to offer, and that is exactly what we are providing today. We are announcing the authorization of up to 460 additional Canadian Armed Forces personnel under Operation Reassurance. This includes a significant bolstering of Canada's presence in Latvia, where we lead NATO's Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group. With 540 personnel at the current time, we will deploy an artillery battery of up to 120 personnel in the coming weeks. À Bruxelles, j'ai rencontré les ministres de la Défense des 10 pays qui contribuent à ce groupe, qui représente un tiers de notre alliance de l'OTAN. Ce soutien fait une vraie différence et témoigne de l'engagement profond du Canada envers les mesures d'assurance et de dissuasion de l'OTAN en Europe. Canada is also announcing the deployment of an additional frigate, HMCS Halifax, under a NATO flag to complement Canada's current contribution to NATO's Standing Maritime Group 2. We will also provide a maritime patrol aircraft to bolster NATO forces in the Euro-Atlantic area. Today, I can also confirm that Canada has made a second delivery of lethal aid to Ukraine, and we will continue to support our Ukrainian partners as they defend their sovereignty. En cette période cruciale, l'engagement du Canada envers l'ordre international fondé sur des règles est plus fort que jamais. And we will continue to step up alongside our NATO allies in defense of transatlantic security at this important time. Merci beaucoup, Miigwech. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Anand. We will be taking 20 minutes of questions, starting with reporters in the room. One question, one follow-up. 20 minutes de questions, en commençant dans la salle. Une question, une sous-question. Radio-Canada, c'est à vous.
Monsieur Trudeau, Madeleine Blais-Morin, le président Poutine était bien au courant de la menace de sanctions. Ça ne l'a pas freiné. Les sanctions n'ont pas renversé l'annexion de la Crimée. Qu'est-ce qui vous fait dire que ça peut être différent cette fois-ci?
Tout d'abord, c'est absolument inacceptable que la Russie ait envahi de nouveau l'Ukraine. Et je pense que effectivement, ça fait longtemps qu'on parle de sanctions si ça allait arriver et on en impose. On en a plus à imposer s'il y a encore plus de violence ou d'invasion. Mais je pense que Vladimir Poutine a peut-être sous-estimé. C'est la fermeté de la réponse de la communauté internationale, que ce soit évidemment les alliés démocratiques de l'Ouest, mais d'autres pays à travers le monde qui voient cette incursion, cette violation du droit international comme étant une menace non seulement à la souveraineté de l'Ukraine, mais à la souveraineté de tout pays à travers le monde. Et cette réponse ferme et unie à travers le monde va finir par coûter très cher au président Poutine.
Est-ce que c'est un constat d'échec de la solution diplomatique?
Nous espérons encore que les pourparlers diplomatiques qui continuent vont pouvoir résoudre cette situation. Et nous allons toujours chercher des solutions paisibles et diplomatiques à des tels actes de violence, mais nous allons aussi démontrer notre fermeté et notre choix profond de toujours défendre les démocraties et la règle de droit.
Next question.
Hi, Prime Minister Tom Ferry, CBC. Vladimir Putin has clearly taken sanctions into account in his calculations on Ukraine. So I'm wondering what makes you think any of this will be effective? And if it's not, what more can Canada and its allies do?
We know that the impact of these decisions that Canada is making, but also that our allies are making, are going to have real feelings, real impacts on the Russian people and on the Russian economy. Highlighting, for example, Germany's suspension of Nord Stream 2, which was going to be a significant source of revenue for the Russian state and Russian Federation. These are things that are going to make a significant difference. As Deputy Prime Minister Freeland said, our issue is not with the Russian people. Our issue is with Vladimir Putin and his decision to unilaterally violate the rule of law, the international rules-based order, and the sovereignty of the independent nation of Ukraine.
You say that your quarrel is not with the Russian people, but I'm wondering what the goal of these sanctions is then. Is it to turn Putin's inner circle against them? Is it to turn the Russian people against them? And you noted that you're sending more lethal aid. Are you trying to make this as costly to Russia as possible, not just in money, but in casualties?
I think as we see a rise of authoritarianism around the world, as we see challenges increasingly to democracies, to democratic principles, we need to all stand strong in defense of those values and principles. And if Putin thinks it is in his interest to invade another sovereign country, we have to demonstrate to him that it is not in his interest, that he will not come through this better or stronger, that this is harming Russia. And quite frankly, to see the impact on Ukrainian families, to see the fear, to see and to hopefully not see the violence that could be coming in the coming days as Russian troops further invade Ukraine, that will be costly, not just in terms of financial impacts, but in terms of lost lives, in terms of lost credibility for Vladimir Putin, and loss of stature for Russia that has shown that it is completely willing to ignore the principles and values of the United Nations that has kept our world remarkably peaceful for over 70 years.
Next question.
Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. There are some who had been asking for additional troops for quite a while before today as a deterrence measure. Why did we wait until now to do this?
We continue to be strong contributors to NATO. We continue to lead the enhanced forward presence in Latvia. We continue to be committed and engaged in many operations like Operation Reassurance. Today we're announcing that we are willing to do even more. I think one of the things that we have seen with Putin's demands around Ukraine and NATO presence, that far from seeing a reduction of Western forces in Eastern Europe, Vladimir Putin has achieved the opposite. And countries like Canada and all our NATO allies are looking at reinforcing our presence in Eastern Europe to demonstrate that these actions by Russia are absolutely unacceptable.
You've said that you're prepared to do more if this doesn't work, but what are you looking for from Russia to decide that you're not going to up what we're doing?
We are looking for Russia to stand down, to cease its violation of Ukrainian sovereignty, Ukrainian territorial integrity, to return to the diplomatic negotiation tables instead of tossing the Minsk agreement out the window as they chose to invade a sovereign independent nation. Russia needs to stand down. It needs to understand that there are consequences for a country that chooses to use force, to violate fundamental precepts of international law that has kept our world remarkably stable for many, many decades. This is something that the entire world needs to stand together with, and Canada and its allies will stand up not just for our friends in Ukraine, but for the values and principles of democracy.
Merci. On va maintenant passer au téléphone. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Please press star one at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. Et la première question, the first question is from Ryan Tumilty, National Post. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. I'm wondering on the Emergencies Act, the streets in Ottawa are clear today of protesters. I'm wondering, the Emergencies Act talks about an ongoing emergency. When do you feel that this emergency will have ended and allow you to revoke the act?
As I said yesterday, this act was brought in because of an emergency, but it is proportional, it is scalable, it is time-limited and specific. Every day we receive information and briefings and analyze whether it continues to be needed, and we are looking to lift it as soon as possible. That decision will be made at the appropriate moment.
Following up.
Yeah, sir, I'm just wondering if you can be more specific. This is a huge piece of federal legislation meant to be used lightly. What is your threshold for removing it if it's not the clearing of border blockades and the streets in Ottawa?
That is exactly what we are looking at every single day as we analyze reports come in from across the country, as we hear the recommendations and operational issues faced by police agencies across the country and intelligence services. As I said many times, we do not want this Emergencies Act to be in place for a day longer than necessary, and we are looking very carefully every step of the way as to when it can be lifted. It was always reasonable, proportional, entirely subject to Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and specific and time-limited in its application. We continue to reevaluate to see when it will no longer be necessary.
Opérateur, prochaine question.
The next question, la prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse.
Merci, bonjour. La question est soit pour M. Trudeau, soit pour Mme Anand concernant le déploiement militaire. D'abord, à Kiev, donc en Ukraine, reste-t-il des soldats? Il y en avait qui avaient été redéployés ailleurs en Europe. Et puis, par rapport à la mission réassurance en Lettonie, est-ce que le but, l'objectif de la mission change? Est-ce que les soldats qu'on envoie pourraient être engagés dans autre chose que de la dissuasion et des exercices de l'OTAN?
Merci Mélanie. L'opération unifiée, qui était une mission de formation qui dure depuis plusieurs années en Ukraine pour former les militaires ukrainiens, est évidemment suspendue actuellement parce qu'il n'y a pas de formation qui se passe en Ukraine et la grande majorité, sinon tous les soldats appliqués à unifier sont sortis de l'Ukraine. Mais je vais passer la parole à la ministre Anand pour en dire plus. Anita.
Bonjour Mélanie. Premièrement, comme j'ai déjà dit, je pense qu'à vous, la sûreté et la sécurité des forces armées canadiennes sont ma priorité absolue, bien sûr. Au sujet de l'opération unifiée, ceci une opération très importante de formation, comme le Premier ministre a dit juste maintenant, mais on arrête cette mission temporairement maintenant et la plupart des soldats ne sont pas en Ukraine à ce moment-là, mais en Europe. Mais il y a quelques soldats en Ukraine pour renforcer l'ambassade là et nous allons faire les décisions à ce sujet dans les jours et les semaines prochaines. Au sujet de l'opération réassurance, comme vous savez, ça c'est notre plus grande mission en Europe pour renforcer le flanc de l'Ouest de l'OTAN. Et cette annonce d'aujourd'hui, ça veut dire que nous allons envoyer plusieurs soldats à cette région. Et ça, c'est nécessaire, je pense, pour renforcer le flanc de l'ouest de l'OTAN, mais aussi de s'assurer que nous allons faire notre contribution pour l'alliance de l'OTAN. Ça, c'est très important. J'étais à l'Europe la semaine dernière. J'ai écouté nos partenaires là et nous sommes en accord partout dans l'alliance de l'OTAN que nous devons faire notre part pour renforcer l'OTAN et nos alliés, nos partenaires là. Pourquoi? Pour la stabilité de l'Europe et la souveraineté de l'Ukraine. Et nous sommes là pour nos partenaires et nos alliés aussi. Merci.
En suivi, Mélanie?
Oui, c'est pas très clair dans ma tête, juste confirmer que l'objectif, le but de la mission va être le même, donc qu'il n'y aura pas de combat comme tel. Et puis, mon autre question, c'est par rapport à la convocation de l'ambassadeur russe. C'est quand même pas un geste banal en diplomatie. D'abord, est-ce que l'ambassade russe a répondu à votre demande? Puis, pourquoi avoir attendu aussi longtemps avant d'ouvrir un canal de communication alors que pour les Ukrainiens, il a toujours été ouvert entre le Canada et l'Ukraine?
Merci, Mélanie. L'opération Réassurance, où on est présent en Lettonie, est là pour indiquer que l'OTAN reste ferme sur la protection de la souveraineté des pays de l'Europe de l'Est, et particulièrement de nos partenaires de l'OTAN. Et nous allons continuer avec cette mission-là, avec une présence accrue, mais la mission reste la même. Par rapport à la diplomatie, je passe la parole à notre ministre d'Affaires étrangères. Mélanie.
Oui, merci Mélanie. Premièrement, le canal de communication avec mon collègue Lavrov est ouvert. Il est ouvert d'ailleurs depuis la première fois que je l'ai rencontré à l'OSCE à Stockholm au mois de décembre, où à l'époque j'avais soulevé mes préoccupations par rapport à la position russe en Ukraine. Donc premier point. Deuxième point, aujourd'hui j'ai donné l'instruction à ma sous-ministre de faire en sorte de rencontrer l'ambassadeur russe au Canada pour lui exprimer très clairement la position du Canada par rapport à la reconnaissance des deux territoires, Luhansk et Donetsk.
Thank you. Operator, we'll take one last question on the phone.
Thank you. La question suivante. The next question is from Stephen Chase from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Question is about our embassy staff in Lviv, and are they still operating there, and how long are they going to operate there, or have you started removing them?
We, a number of weeks ago, started to scale down our presence in Ukraine for the protection of Canadians and Canadian consular services and families. Consular services continue, including a embassy staff in Lviv, but those decisions will be made day by day as to how long our ambassador stays there and the small staff she has around her. But I'll turn to, again, Minister of Foreign Affairs for further clarification on that.
Thank you, Steve. So there are members of Global Affairs Canada and their head of mission. Our ambassador is indeed in Lviv. They are also along other countries, including the UK and the US, which is also in Lviv. We decided to move our operations from Kiev to Lviv a couple of days ago, and that was for security reasons. But the goal was to stay in Ukraine as long as possible. We think it is important that we be there to offer consular services. And meanwhile, our advice to Ukrainian Canadians is clear. If you're in Ukraine, please leave now. Thank you.
Following up.
Yeah, the second question is about the 460 number. And my question is, how much of this number will be going to Latvia? And I assume the rest is you're just counting the people on the frigate and the people on the plane, which I assume was an Aurora.
Hi, Steve. Let me lay it out for you. An artillery battery of about 120 people, that is, will be the first element to deploy in 30 days for approximately 6 weeks. That congregation of people will be drawn from bases across the country. The large tranche of the 460 is going to be placed and part of the HMCS Halifax, as you suggested in your question, that will be deployed in March, towards the last part of March. And finally, the CP-140 Maritime Patrol aircraft will also have a contingent of that 460. So you can see that we are dividing up the contingent of 460 across these 3 different items. Thank you.
Thank you all. This is what ends today's press conference. C'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui. Merci.